Hello, Peppers. Welcome to the last of which I'm referring to as the midnight specials.
Okay.
When I turn up at midnight to edit this thing, and so you guys get it quite late because I've been watching comedy on Friday night. The Sydney Comedy Festival finishes.
What are you going to see tonight?
Tonight, that's a great question. I am going to see. I should know this off the top of my head.
Sorry, we should have prepared this beforehand.
This is great podcasting.
Eating into valuable podcast time.
This is great podcast. I'm going to see Jacques Barrett and David Quirk and Floyd Alexander Hunt.
Okay.
So, they, as always, will be excellent. But let's get on to... I'm Chaz Licciardello from Planet America, a TV show that none of you probably watch.
I'm Dr. David Smith from the University of Sydney. The camera is at a different angle today for those of you watching us online. So this looks like CCTV footage.
It's kind of the eye in the sky. So if we sound a little bit nervous, if we sound like we feel like we're getting caught shoplifting... Now you know why.
Okay.
All right, let's get into it. Let's start off. There's so much news from the last few days, a lot of which we covered on the Planet America, the TV show, which I'm sure some of you do watch.
Yes. Did you cover the most important story of the week?
Oh, well, what's that?
Which is the owner of the now disgraced horse that won the Kentucky Derby, but then tested positive to a performance-enhancing drug.
That did not make the show.
He went on Fox News and said, "America's not the same place anymore. This is a cancel culture thing."
Oh.
Because the horse got stripped of the Kentucky Derby. This guy has had 30 horses test positive to drugs. He had a horse test positive to drugs last year that was called Charlatan. But anyway, this is what I'll call reductio ad cancel culturum. This is exactly where the discourse needs to end up.
There is a lot of this. There's a lot of something bad happened to me equals I have been cancelled. This
is the horse that Donald Trump described as a junkie.
Yeah.
Even Trump's cancelled him.
Well, now we didn't cover that. We didn't cover Bo, but Bo Obama, his death.
Yes.
He was cancelled.
By old age.
That's why he's cancelled.
Do you remember the controversy when they first got Bo?
No.
Well, this is typical just beaten up controversy. So I think Obama had said, he had promised his daughters that if he won the presidency, they would get a dog.
Yes.
And he said to the media, "Oh, yeah, we're going to get a mutt from rescue." But then Ted Kennedy gifted him this highly pedigreed, I think it was Portuguese water dog.
Oh, it was promises not kept.
Yes,
Broken promises.
This was and of course, this just smacks of elitism. Portuguese water dog from Ted Kennedy.
I had my fingers crossed that there was some kind of racial angle in the controversy. Them going, "Oh, you got a black dog. Of course you did."
Look, I don't want to go back to the discourse at that time, but I'm sure that there was racist elements in the discourse.
Anyway.
Okay, well, R.I.P. Bo. Go and
the Kentucky horse.
Yeah, Google the Ramones song "Pet Cemetery" and listen to it.
There we go. That's
Stay away from the pet cemetery.
That's for you, Bo. Let's talk about slightly more serious topic, Israel.
Yes.
We covered this at length on the show, so I've said plenty of stuff. I'd like you to say what you have to say about that.
Okay, so I'm reminded of what John le Carré said about the Cold War, that it seemed like there was no future, only a slide into ever more terrifying versions of the present. This is what we seem to be seeing in Israel at the moment. And just stepping aside from the specific thing that caused the most recent conflagration, so that was attempted evictions in the neighbourhood of Sheikh Jarrah, which there have been Palestinian protests about this for weeks, that had resulted in violent confrontations in the Temple Mount Al-Aqsa Mosque area. Leaving that aside, and by the way, the Israeli High Court has actually currently postponed a ruling on the legality of those evictions. The major issue here is, at this point, everyone believes the two-state solution is dead.
Yes.
Most countries around the world are still nominally committed to it, including the US, but there was a recent poll done of Israelis and Palestinians where I think in each group 13% of people said that they thought there might be a two-state solution in the future, right? So everyone thinks that the two-state solution is dead.
But what happens then? Because there is no other solution, is there?
Okay, so we're looking at one state. And I mean, and really, given what the nominally Palestinian territory looks like at the moment, all these tiny enclaves completely disconnected from each other, even if that was formally recognized as a state by Israel, it would be no more a state then than it is now.
Sure. Yeah.
Not a real state.
Yeah.
So, no, it's going to be one state. The question is, what does it look like? What I'm sure most of the world will want to see is a democratic state with equal rights for all. That is never, ever going to happen, at least not with the current Israeli leadership, because there is a worry that would dilute the Jewish character of the state, and that Palestinian birth rates are a lot higher, and Jews would be a minority in their own country.
It's a demographic thing.
Yeah. So it's just, so this is the situation that we're looking at. Israel, obviously the far more powerful party in this conflict, for years has been undertaking measures that basically further and further compress Palestinian territory, that make it harder for Palestinians to move around. And it's very, very difficult to see any kind of way out of this. And now turning to the US, because this is a US focused podcast, obviously. So Trump was the most pro-Israel president that the US has really ever had.
Depending on how you define pro-Israel, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Like I would suggest, I would suggest try and create a situation where Israel can live in a constructive situation. It would be pro-Israel.
Yes.
Which is not what Trump did.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not going to call him pro-Jewish, because he certainly wasn't. His what was driving Trump's support of Israel was his evangelical fan base, which is pro-Israel becoming the Jewish homeland as it was in the Bible, but it could in no way be called pro-Jewish, because the idea is it's supposed to lead to the Armageddon, when Jews will be given a chance to convert, and if they don't, they go to hell. So Trump basically, I remember at the very beginning of his administration, he would mumble something about not wanting any new Israeli settlements, but basically gave the green light for new settlements to Israel. Absolutely backed Netanyahu to the hilt. And so for the last 5 years, there's been even more land grabs than there usually were. Now, of course, there was the great Trump peace plan.
The Abraham Accords.
Yes. And it was notable. I mean, I think that for a lot of people, there was this glimmer of hope at the beginning of the Trump administration, because during the 2016 election, Trump was the only Republican who even believed, or even seemed to believe, that negotiation was even possible anymore, right? The rest of the Republicans took the Likud position that Palestinians can't be negotiated with and shouldn't be negotiated with, but Trump, of course, is like, no, this is a real estate deal. Let's do it. So I think that,
he still says that.
Yeah. But it turned out he was as inept with that as he is with his real estate dealings in real life. So what we got, the Abraham Accords, is ridiculously overblown name. For those of you not familiar with the monotheistic religions, this is referring to the fact that Abraham is this father figure in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So this is about the commonality of the groups. And for those of you who don't remember the details of this hollow farce, which we talked about a lot last year, the UAE and Bahrain were the first two countries to sign on to this. And so this came in was it the third or the fourth year of the Trump presidency? Trump, by this point, was pretty desperate to get a semblance of a deal. So he had put Jared Kushner onto it. Jared Kushner had held an economic summit at which there was absolutely no Palestinian representation, just a few bored rich kids from the Gulf states. And there was, some plan for $50 billion for Palestinian economic development, reflecting the Trump administration's widely and sincerely held view that all other countries are shitholes that can be bought off very easily. Then the political part of this was these peace deals. First of all, with the UAE, a country that's never been at war with Israel and whose military has been cooperating with Israel since 2017. Bahrain was the next to sign on, a country that had cooperated with Israel on an intelligence level during the Arab Spring. I think the other two countries that signed on were Sudan and Morocco. Once again, notably, two countries that had never been at war with Israel, which aren't even close to Israel, and which were effectively bribed with US aid money. There were all sorts of other weird little developments as well, like Kosovo announcing that it would move its embassy to Jerusalem. Now, okay, why was all of this a complete and utter farce? Well, first of all, apart from the fact that, okay, so none of these countries are actually at war with Israel, it did conspicuously leave out the most important countries in the region. So Saudi Arabia never signed on. The countries that actually surround Israel never signed on, so there was no involvement from Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt.
There was always this vibe that Saudi Arabia wasn't far away. But
that was such wishful thinking. No, Saudi Arabia always has to contend with what happened in the 70s when militants took over the two holiest sites in Islam, right? Ever since then, the Saudi royal family has always tried to out-Islam anyone else. And the Saudi government was very good at making noises that soothed and pleased the Trump administration. This idea, I would frequently say, well, the Saudis have got to be the next to sign on. They can't let the UAE steal the march from. This was always just wishful thinking from idiots who always write that kind of shit. So, the Saudis never signed on. None of the countries that have actually been at war with Israel ever signed on. There was, you could sort of see it was part of this overall strategic logic that Trump had of creating this group of US allies in the Middle East who are all united by their opposition to Saudi Arabia. And you did sometimes see glimmers of that. And there was some cooperation between
Iran.
With Iran, cooperation between Saudis and Israel. So there was this idea of Saudis, Emiratis, Egyptians, Israelis, it could all be this united front against Iran. The problem is that is simply not strong enough to actually unite these countries in any meaningful or durable way. And once shit actually got real in the conflict, as it has done over the last few weeks, suddenly all these countries that signed on to the Abraham Accords wrote statements condemning Israel and proclaiming their everlasting solidarity with the Palestinians. Now, of course, these statements are completely empty and hollow and meaningless, and they always have been. The Palestinians are very, very used to, constantly being sold out by Arab states. But the point is, the Abraham Accords have changed absolutely nothing. They were always a photo op above all else. We had the photos of the wealthy Emiratis coming and hanging out in Tel Aviv, the wealthy Israelis going and hanging out in Dubai. And people whose entire experience of the Middle East is layovers in Dubai, I'm sure that they were very, very impressed by this deal. Basically, the whole Kushner milieu, I'm sure that they were incredibly impressed by this, but it was completely empty. And we're seeing how empty it is now.
Yeah, the impression I got from the Abraham Accords era was that they're basically running on the theory that something is better than nothing, and just if you get enough somethings happening, it feels like momentum's happening.
Well,
then people might go along. But the truth is, I feel like there's such a, especially on this issue, the Israel-Palestinian issue, there's just such a powerful nihilism in the region these days that just nothing is going to overcome that.
Yeah, so powerful nihilism is the right word. There's a lot of that around at the moment. So the way that Netanyahu tried to sell this, because this was really all about Netanyahu's domestic survival. The way he tried to sell it was, well, okay, so all of these countries have been implacably opposed to Israel for years. This delinks Arab states from the Palestinian issue, which is, that's the first step towards peace, because it's no longer a war between Israel and the Arab world. Now, the problem is that in realistic terms, that had always been the case. Most of the Arab world, yes, they were prepared to make these statements in solidarity with the Palestinians, but they were never prepared to actually do anything about it. So there wasn't
all the countries that signed on to the Abraham Accords were already below the table dealing with Israel all the time.
Yes, yeah. So this was not any change, and then there was never any representation of the Palestinians in this at all. So but obviously the backdrop to this is how many 4 elections in 3 years now in Israel where Netanyahu's been unable to form a government. I'm sure there'll be another there'll be another election soon. This Trump-esque situation where being prime minister is the only thing keeping him out of a court, being prosecuted for corruption, for which there seems to be extraordinarily ample evidence. Nihilism is the word for what's going on at the moment.
Maybe I'm just in a bit of a dark mood with this topic because I've been watching a lot of this on TV.
Yeah,
but I've heard some people talk about the election aspect where it suits. In fact, John did on our show today. Mm-hmm. He talked about how it suits both Abbas and Netanyahu to be fighting at the moment.
Yes.
Their electoral situation.
Yeah,
and that may well be the case.
Yes,
but
Palestinians haven't had an election since 2006. I think. Yeah.
But I can't help feeling that just from, as I say, I might just be in a dark mood.
Yeah.
I can't help feeling that their populaces just want it. Like as in they just had it. And the Palestinians have had it. And the Israelis gone, not another rocket. And it's just, they just want to kill each other. And I don't know, I hope I'm wrong, but it looks that way. It looks like people are looking for an excuse to fight.
Yeah.
To me. And they are, it looks to me like Israel going, right, oh, okay, here's a couple of rockets. Right, well, we're just going to destroy you. And the Palestinians are going, well, what's the fucking point? Let's go. And I don't see how anyone's achieving anything. I don't feel like there's any strategy or any whatsoever in the long term or even in the medium term. And it's just, this is why I find it so depressing.
I don't think the Biden administration is going to find a way
I don't think so
out of this at all. Biden very much was deprioritizing this. And
he doesn't even have an ambassador.
No, he doesn't have an ambassador.
For either Palestinians or Israel.
Yes.
It's, and like we did talk about this on the show, that he's the Democrats, and in particular Biden, because he's such a poll seeker.
Yes, yeah.
Is the worst possible person for this, because the Democrats, this is their most vulnerable issue, where they are split 50-50.
Yeah.
Literally 50-50.
Yes.
And so he's constantly trying to try and balance and teeter and not fall off the pole amongst Democrats, because that's what Biden does.
Yeah. Yep.
And then to try and solve this devilish issue while trying to not fall off the balance beam, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
And so I'd be surprised if he achieved
Yes.
it.
Now, I'm not going to exactly call this a light-hearted coda, but just a bizarre story. This is another heads up from El Hardy, who sent me this article about an American evangelical messianic rabbi who's been exposed as continuing to be an evangelical Christian who's evangelizing Jews in Jerusalem under the guise of running a yeshiva, which is a religious school. So this is a guy called Michael Elk who grew up in Pennsylvania, went to a non-denominational church, and at some point started presenting himself as an Orthodox Jew, and no one quite knows why. But it's believed that he's associated with this ministry out of South Carolina that does undercover missions around the world. So anyway, he presented himself as an Orthodox Jew in Pennsylvania, got married to a woman who he converted to, well, supposedly converted to Orthodox Judaism. They went to Israel, basically lived off the charity of their neighbors because neither of them had any source of income. And ultimately he was running this small religious school with students, but then it's been exposed that what he was actually doing was evangelizing them towards Christianity. And so the Jewish Chronicle, I'll put the link in here, which describes it in great detail, but just a couple of quotes from this. Says, talk about his wife. 5 years ago, Mrs. Elk was diagnosed with colon cancer. The community rallied around the family, raising money for her treatment. But by this time, anti-missionary investigators from Be'nenu, because this is such a frequent problem in Israel that there's actually organizations devoted to keeping an eye on suspicious people from the US who are actually evangelizing undercover. Anti-missionary investigators from BNU were looking into the family. Their cover fell apart last month when the Elk's oldest daughter, whose bat mitzvah had been funded by the community while her mother was battling cancer, told a school friend that Jesus accepts everyone. Rumours began to spread. In February, Mrs. Elk passed away at the age of 42 and was buried in an Orthodox cemetery in Jerusalem. There are now widespread demands for her body to be exhumed. Mrs. Bradley, one of Elk's closest Orthodox friends, told the Jewish Chronicle that it was very painful to find out the truth about her late friend. It felt like a betrayal, she said. Once you know that someone lied to you about something as big and important, you don't know that you can trust at all from the start what they said. You end up going over all your interactions and reassessing them. Was this real? Was that real? And the mother of a boy who was circumcised by Elk and has now gone through a revision procedure told the Jewish Chronicle, "I feel like someone punched me." No, let's not ask any more questions about that particular sentence. But yeah, the point is, evangelical Christians not reliable allies of the Jewish people.
No. Okay, and I'm putting down on the board for next week revision.
Yes.
What's a revision procedures?
Once again, thanks very much to Elle for dredging that one up.
Thank you, Elle. Let's talk pipeline. Because we're really bringing this podcast down. Although you did almost bring it back with a revision procedure. Pipeline. Once again, we talked about this at length on the show.
Yes.
So why don't you start on this?
So this is the Colonial Pipeline that carries oil from Houston all the way to the northeastern seaboard. It's the biggest pipeline in the United States. I believe
so, yes.
Yes.
And it is 45% of the oil to the East Coast.
And it is one of the many crucial pieces of American infrastructure that is entirely in private hands.
Yes. 85%
yes.
of their critical infrastructure is in private hands.
Which is great, as we're going to see. So this week it was targeted by ransomware hackers. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with ransomware hacking, what it is it usually actually targets governmental systems because it targets places that are going to have perceived vulnerabilities, which is usually municipal services, hospitals, which often have massive and antiquated systems operated by older people who don't understand how all this works. It's absolutely ripe for ransomware, which is, getting into it in some way, locking up the system or claiming that you've locked up the system or can lock up the system. Sometimes along with we've stolen personal information or embarrassing information, we're going to sell it or we're going to make it public. And so to make all this problem go away, we need a ransom, generally to be paid in Bitcoin.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Dave, because I happen to know a lot more about ransomware hacking than you obviously do.
I'm sure.
Because
you're involved in it?
No, because I saw a documentary on this about 15 years ago. It was called Swordfish. And I don't know if you ever saw the documentary Swordfish about ransomware hackers.
15 years ago?
Yeah. There
was ransomware hacking going on 15 years ago.
Yeah, and Swordfish, they were hacking to...
Were they hijacking people's Q cats?
Well, I wasn't 100% sure.
Clap back to last week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't exactly remember what they were hijacking, but they were hijacking something. I remember that. I remember John Travolta. He had really weird hair, and Hugh Jackman. This is what happens when the ransomware hackers. The way this works is while they're hacking. For start, when they hack things, you just see cubes on the screen because like numbers and letters and stuff are too boring for film.
Yeah.
So you just see these cubes, and they just bring up the vertices one at a time. And the way they do it, the really hardcore hackers.
Yes.
This is true. I saw the documentary. The really hardcore hackers, they do it while someone holds a gun to their head and John Travolta gets a lady to give him a blowjob at the same time while they're hacking in 1 minute. And if they don't do it, then they die.
Right.
It's really good stuff.
Yeah.
I recommend everyone go and see that documentary, Swordfish.
We always bring you the most cutting-edge research.
Anyway, you take it from there. Now I've educated people.
On PEP. Anyway, so that's ransomware. There was, I don't know if it still goes on, of actual private citizens being targeted, because often older people would get targeted, saying, we've locked up your computer.
Yeah, that's a bit of a cliche.
You'll never see your photos of your grandkids again unless you pay us $200 in Bitcoin or something. And
I have received emails along those lines.
Anyway, but this is by far the biggest thing that's ever been targeted by ransomware hackers.
Apparently accidentally. So much so they apologised. Like, did you see the apology?
I didn't see the apology.
I'll read it out. We are apolitical. We do not participate in geopolitics. Do not need to tie us with a defined government and look for our motives. Our goal is to make money and not creating problems for society. From today, we introduce moderation and check each company that our partners want to encrypt to avoid social consequences in the future.
Wow. I'm not sure if that quite meets the criteria for an apology, but that's quite an extraordinary statement.
Yeah, anyway.
Okay, yeah. So they targeted this, colonial, and okay. Now there's a bit of a misunderstanding of what happened here. The ransomware hackers did not shut the pipeline down.
No.
The ransomware hackers had no capacity to shut the pipeline down. They stole certain pieces of information. It was the company that shut the pipeline down. And we'll come back to why this was in just a second. But, okay, obviously this caused huge problems. In North Carolina, it meant that 66%, I think, of gas stations were actually out of gas for a while. So especially across the southeast.
There were 10,000 gas stations that were out.
Yeah. Across the southeast, and in a society as car dependent as the United States, this is an absolute disaster. Biden was quickly on television urging people not to panic, urging people not to hoard fuel. Clearly, these urges really touched the hearts of the what do they call themselves? The dark side. We didn't want
the dark side.
The dark side. We didn't want to cause any problems, and we're definitely not the Russian government.
You know how you know they panicked?
How?
I'll tell you how you know they panicked, because it sounds like I'm delivering a jokey, but I'm not. This is dead serious. They've reconnected the pipeline.
Yes.
They're saying it's going to take 2 weeks for the fuel to get out there. But it only took 2 days for them to run out of fuel. And the reason for that is because these idiots used 2 weeks of fuel in 2 days because they were just hoarding and panic buying and going crazy.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
Yes. Okay.
There shouldn't have been a fuel out for at least a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's come back to the point that it was the company itself that shut down the fuel pipeline. Now, why do you think they did this? Well, CNN is reporting that it was because their billing system was compromised, and they wouldn't have been able to figure out who to invoice during the period where they were under ransom.
I hadn't heard that.
So they shut the pipeline down, caused mass panic across the United States, deprived 10,000 fuel stations of gas, because there would have been a brief period when they wouldn't have known who to invoice, when they might not have got paid.
That is a great little
thing. That's been reported by CNN. 3 employees anonymously told them that was the reason, and it is stupid enough to be true.
And by the way, another way you can tell that the dark side didn't intend this to happen, weren't trying to shut down any pipeline, is look at their ransom. Do you know what their ransom was?
75 Bitcoin.
Yeah, $5 million.
Yeah.
If you're going to shut down half the country, you're not going to be charging. That's like Dr. Evil.
Yeah, that really is.
At the beginning of Austin Powers.
Yeah,
where he threatens nuclear destruction for $1 million.
Yeah, no, it really. Well, I was shocked to see how small it was, and I think that does comport with holy shit, we really didn't mean to target something this big, and we're so shocked by our own success that we're only going to ask for $5 million. Yeah. And I mean, the company initially said, we will not negotiate with terrorists, but of course they paid it, because that's really a fairly...
They paid it straight away.
Yeah.
At the time they were saying that, they'd already paid it.
Yeah, it's a fucking trivial amount. Anyway.
And that also explains why the Biden administration were making all those ums and ahs, and people were going, well, do you think they should pay him? And they're going, well, it's up to a private company and stuff. And people are going, wow, you're really hands off. No, it's because they knew they'd already paid them off.
Now, okay, I'm reluctant to say that was the dumbest thing that happened in America this week. In a week where we had the owner of a horse claiming that his junkie horse was the victim of cancel culture, and we had Marjorie Taylor Greene literally stalking AOC onto the floor of Congress, screaming at her, "Debate me." So things can always get dumber.
That one.
But this was the dumbest thing involving infrastructure.
Sure. By the way, while we're talking about this,
yes,
as a little aside, whenever there's some kind of fuel shock in America, the thing I love doing is watching how much they go crazy whenever someone endangers their petrol at all.
Yeah.
And then seeing when they're whinging about how expensive the petrol is all of a sudden with the fuel shock, the price shock, and then doing a conversion to dollars per litre and seeing how much they're actually talking about.
Yeah.
In this case here, what they were all going crazy about, oh my God, how can anyone afford this fuel? It was 80 cents a litre. That's the high point, 80 cents a litre. That is yet another reason why America is not going to be much help when it comes to climate change.
No.
Because they are so used to such cheap energy. Anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the colonial pipeline. So I mean, all in all, it was kind of 70s week where you had increasing inflation, poorer than expected jobs numbers, and lines at gas stations.
Literally the only time in history that Don Jr. has ever been prescient, when he made the Jimmy Carter call at the beginning of the week, before any of this shit happened, saying that Joe Biden is actually Jimmy Carter, and then we had a week from 1979, just transplanted exactly everything one after another. It was amazing. But anyway, do you have anything to add about that before we go on? Because I've got something very exciting for me.
What are you?
Not exciting for you, and not exciting for our listeners.
Okay.
I am moving Congress up. We're going to talk about Congress at the beginning of the podcast.
All right.
Rather than the end of the podcast, just for once, because I've got stuff that's weeks and weeks old.
Let's talk about Congress.
Okay, so first I'm just going to just generally, and then we'll go into a few bills, and then we'll get back to more of this week. Okay. First of all, this is one that's been kicking around for ages, which hasn't got much publicity, but I find interesting. In 2021, threats to members of Congress have increased by 107%.
Okay.
They have more than doubled. And that's just
yeah.
Doesn't really get reported on. No one really cares. Oh, yeah, Congress people getting threatened. Oh, yeah, that's nice. And on that comforting note, the very next week after that story came out, the New York Times did a feature on the high likelihood of politicians being about to die. And there's some very interesting numbers in there, which I'll share with you. I'll actually put it in
an actuarial piece.
A bit like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
It's, I'll put this in the homework. If you look in the blurb on either the Facebook or the YouTube video, you'll see the link there, where you'll see Dave's link from before as well. Okay, the average age of a sitting senator is 64 at the moment, which is on the high side. There have been 10 deaths in the last 11 sessions of the Senate. When I say sessions, I mean 2 years.
Yes.
So it's basically on average there's one death for every 2 years in the Senate.
Right.
At least recently. It used to be much more. So that's with the powers of modern medicine. This is a fun one. This is not like a stat. It's just a fun one, which I hadn't really thought of before. Patrick Leahy, who is 81.
Yes.
Who is from Vermont.
Senator pro tempore.
Yes. He was briefly hospitalized in January. Vermont's younger senator is Bernie Sanders, who's 79.
Whippersnapper.
And he's already had a heart attack. So there's that. And we got Dianne Feinstein, who's 87. 9 Democrat senators represent states with Republican governors who can appoint anyone they choose should that one of those Democrat senators die. The other way around exists as well, 6 Republican senators, but if a Republican dies, it's not going to change the balance of power.
Yeah.
Every one of those 9 would change the balance of power. In fact, the only reason we have the current balance of power is because this already happened.
Yes.
Because Reverend in Georgia,
Raphael Warnock.
Yeah, Raphael Warnock is replacing Johnny Isaacson.
Yes.
Who was sick and had to retire.
Yes.
And that's the reason that seat was open.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that Kristen Sinema replaced John McCain.
Yeah.
As well, who died.
Yes.
Yeah. So the current reason, yes.
So that's the only reason Democrats hold the Senate right now is because of this exact process. I should say, by the way, there's some really interesting stuff in that article if you have a look. But I should say that I am a little bit suspicious about that article because even though it's got good numbers, I did notice they quoted Brian Fallon. Now, for those who don't know who Brian Fallon is a guy behind Demand Justice, and it sounds like a C-grade movie. But no, Demand Justice is a group that at the moment they're driving a van around Washington that says Breyer retire because Justice Breyer, they're worried he's going to die.
Oh, yes,
And I can't help thinking that this whole article might have been seeded by Brian Fallon to the New York Times going, hey, you guys, you should write about this. Because
he just hates old people.
Well, he's trying to give Breyer as many hints as he possibly can, it might be time for him to retire.
Driving a van around.
It's not subtle. Breyer retire.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm a bit sus of it, but it's good. It's interesting stats. On this, I want to also tell you a bit about the filibuster. I've got a few articles about this which are interesting as well. For a start, this is something which I don't think a lot of people realise.
Yes.
How many filibusters do you think there have been this year? Because we're talking about the filibuster, how it's stopping everything. How many filibusters do you reckon we've had?
Filibusters or threats to use the filibuster?
I mean, how many bills have been filibustered so
No
far?
idea.
0.
Ah.
There have been 13 bills passed. 0 have been filibustered. The only time anything has been filibustered was amendments have been filibustered by the majority to stop Republicans
Chaz,
passing amendments.
from a game theoretic viewpoint, though, you have to say that's a heavily censored data set.
It's interesting you say that because
Yes.
the article which I've got up there
Yeah.
has a bit of an analysis where they take into consideration threats to use the filibuster
Yes.
for exactly that reason.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me tell you the numbers.
Yeah.
Here we go. Parties failed on 43% of their agenda priorities. This is over the last few years.
Yes. Yeah.
Of their agenda priorities in unified government as compared to 49% in divided government. So there actually wasn't that much difference between unified and divided.
Right. Yes.
That doesn't change the filibuster. You can filibuster in unified
Yes.
government, obviously. When Democrats most recently held all 3 branches of government, they failed on 50% of their agenda items. When Republicans most recently held all 3, they failed on 36%. Okay, let's break down those failures. Let's see how much it's the filibuster's fault. All right. The filibuster accounted for only about 1/3 of the majority party's failures during the periods of unified government. That includes instances where there's reporting in the news indicating that legislation was dropped because of a threat of a filibuster.
Right.
60% of the failures during the Obama years were attributable to disagreements within the party.
Right.
Now, there's no way we can know whether people are anticipating the possibility of a filibuster, so they haven't tried.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, you talk about agenda items failing.
Yeah.
What never even makes it to the agenda because they're aware. Just a interesting little methodological point here. Selection mechanisms are incredibly important when you're looking at data like that. In other words, what are the processes that determine what gets into your data set in the first place, and are those processes relevant to the causal argument that you are making? So in this case, looking at the bills that actually make it to the vote, they're the bills that it's already been determined by the parties. These are not threatened, by the filibuster. That's what I meant by a censored data set. It's not it's not that someone's coming in with a black marker and saying
cancelled.
The public is not allowed to see this. It's more saying that a more complete picture has to actually take into account the stuff that never made it into your data set in the first place because of causally relevant factors.
Which is more than fair enough. And I haven't replaced Chaz. I'm not suddenly pro filibuster.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that it is interesting when you look at the numbers. I do agree that is a weakness of the numbers. On the flip side, things you don't need 60 votes for, there have been a couple of things which haven't got much publicity, which I think are worth drawing to your attention, humble listener. First of all, the Congressional Review Act we've talked about before. The Democrats used it the other day and didn't really get reported. It was they used it to repeal, or they kind of rolled back a rollback. Like Trump rolled back, like Obama brought in all these methane standards.
Yeah.
And Trump rolled them back, but he rolled them back too late. And so now the Democrats have just rolled back his rollback using the CRA. For those who don't know, the Congressional Review Act lasts for, it's effectively, I've forgotten how many, I think it's 60 legislative days, which ends up being about 9 months. If a regulation gets through and then within about 9-10 months-ish,
yes,
it's a majority vote. It can't be filibustered.
Yep.
You lose a majority vote on it. Not only do you repeal the regulation, but you actually salt the ground so they can never pass
salt the ground
anything like that ever again, which is pretty hardcore. But anyway, they did that so there's going to be methane regulations for a long time now because any attempt to remove them is going to be on salted ground. Anyway, but that's something that just happened, which is interesting. Something else is interesting with the reconciliation we've talked about at length.
Yes.
And 3 weeks ago, we were talking about, oh my God, the parliamentarian just basically gave them practically unlimited reconciliations. They said you can edit your previous reconciliation bill.
Yes.
And then within a week, we found there was like nothing that they could get 50 votes for. And so we just dropped that. But there is something they can do. And I'll tell you right now, once again, not much publicity. Republicans had a little fest about 2 weeks ago now where they were talking about the debt ceiling, which is coming due in summer.
Oh, man.
And they've agreed they're not going to reduce they're not going to raise the debt ceiling without spending cuts. For those who don't know what I'm referring to, very briefly, the debt ceiling is not something that stops you incurring debt.
No.
It stops you paying the debt. So it's a really, really dumb thing.
Oh, my God.
Like, it basically just allows you to default your country. That's what it allows you to do. You can take on as much debt as you like, but you just can't pay your bills.
I've got to say,
I've
got this weird nostalgia for the debt ceiling because you remember the standoff in 2011?
Yes, I do.
I had just started working at the US Studies Center at that point. I'd just come back from the US, and that was the first time I ever did media commentary. It was, talking about the debt ceiling.
You missed that?
I've got a weird nostalgia for it. Like it.
Well, it's coming back.
It was a lot simpler. Things were a lot simpler then.
It's coming back.
Great. Okay. Look forward to it. We can do a 10-year retrospective because it'll be like almost on the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah. It'll be around July, August. But the reason I bring this up now is to say, you know what? If you can't pass anything else by reconciliation, that is something you can pass by reconciliation. Destroy the debt ceiling.
Smart.
And that's something that Joe Manchin should sign on for.
Yeah,
and by the way, this is not some dodgy little Chuck Schumer-ish style scheme. That is what the budget reconciliation is there for.
Yes.
It's there for budgets and for the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
So that's a totally legitimate use.
But speaking of dodgy Chuck Schumer schemes, and I'm not sure if you're going to mention this,
yeah,
you posted an article about Schumer's incredibly skillful use of filibusterish things in ways that protect the majority rather than the minority.
I referred to it in passing then, but I didn't go into any detail.
Yeah.
I'll put the article in the homework if you're interested. It was it's where they used the 60 vote requirement to stop amendments being offered by the Republicans.
Now this is not the easiest article to read, I warn you. It is
very clever.
Full of parliamentary technicalities. But yes.
It's very clever. Now that's
that actually weirdly increased my respect for Chuck Schumer.
Oh, he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come to pretty soon saying I'm not very happy with him about. But,
okay.
But it's still smart. It's just annoying.
Okay.
But it's time for now.
A stats nugget.
What time is it?
I don't remember how that goes.
I'm sure everyone wanted a stats nugget.
Sorry.
You're going to give him policy
I'm going
time.
to give him policy time. This is some of the bills that have been kicking around that we talked about once, and there's been no updates. So I'm going to give you some updates. First of all, DC Statehood Bill. We just mentioned it, left it. Okay. It's gone. It's not going to happen.
Oh, dear.
The House passed it. The Senate, they can only get 46 senators to even support. They can't even get 49. Manchin's nowhere near it.
Yeah.
Manchin's saying you need a constitutional amendment. I'm not going to support it without a constitutional amendment, which is not an unreasonable position, to be honest.
think that's a deeply unreasonable position.
Well, it mentions the status of DC in the Constitution a number of times. And so, in particular, the number of representatives they have, etc., is actually in the Constitution. So it's fixed. So if you made them a state, you would need to change that somehow. Now, I personally am not of the view that it does require a constitutional amendment.
No.
I'm just saying I don't think it's an unreasonable position. But yeah, you can disagree if you want. Do you want to say more? I disagree.
I disagree.
Okay, that's fine. All right. But anyway, the polling on this is just terrible. Like that's the other thing. Like they've been acting like it's a possibility. It's not a possibility. It's basically 36% favour, 35 to 36% on all the polls favour DC statehood. And it's very fragile polling as well.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how you word the question. You get huge swings in response. Like Data for Progress, they got 54% supporting it when they asked people, Statehood would give congressional voting representation to more than 714,000 Washingtonians, just like Americans in every other state. And then...
That's excellent. And then you ask, do you want to change the American flag? Fuck no!
Yes. Well, then they're asked about about changing the U.S. Constitution. Exactly. And you get 29%. If you've got that kind of soft support, it's easy to wreck, right?
Yeah.
Also, I mean, look, to me, just speaking of myself here, I mean, I would like DC to be a state, but there is an argument that they have never, the people advocating this have never dealt with properly. In fact, they just ignore.
What's that, Chaz?
Which is, why can't you just make Maryland bigger? Like when you're going, oh, these people need representation. Yeah, okay, they need representation. Why can't they just be subsumed by another state? Why do they need to be their own state? And I've heard Democrats try to answer that, but they just change the subject. They honestly, I've never heard someone actually try and take that on. There is an argument to use that Maryland don't want that. So, Maryland have to vote to allow that. But there's no attempt to campaign to make Maryland positive towards it. They just go, no, well, okay, well, let's make them their own state. I mean, it's very transparent what this is all about. Obviously, the Republicans don't want them to have two senators. The Democrats do want to have two senators. Personally, I just want those people to have a vote. But anyway.
There's a really interesting Wikipedia page on federal districts around the world. Channeling my inner Richard Cooke here.
Yeah.
And it makes this really interesting point that federal districts are actually, they're becoming a thing of the past in most cases. Like in most cases, capital cities are gaining autonomy in some way. So DC, the ACT, these are becoming historical anomalies. It's much more, so like Mexico City now, which used to be part of the Distrito Federal, the DF, like it's now basically its own autonomous state. Essentially, I think that Brasilia has gone the same way. In Brazil, I think that Delhi is same state as in India. So, yeah, these are the idea of a federal district is actually a bit of an anachronism in worldwide terms. Now, there are plenty of things in the US that are anachronisms in worldwide terms. So I'm certainly not saying that makes it inevitable that it will become a state or some sort of autonomous enclave. But yes.
The people who've been forgotten in all this for me, though, is Puerto Rico. And there's two bills on the table right now to make them a state.
Yes.
Which I think there's a much stronger arguments for myself. There is no Maryland to take over Puerto Rico.
No, but it's very, very controversial within Puerto Rico.
Yes. I was going to get to this. Oh, you're so good.
Yes. Whereas DC statehood, I think, is supported by the overwhelming majority of DC residents, apart from Republican legislators and their staff who hate the place because occasionally people give them a mean look in a restaurant or something. But
there've actually been 6 referenda in Puerto Rico on this. And I'll tell you how they went. 1967, 39% chose statehood. 1993, 47% chose statehood. 1998, 47% chose statehood. 2012, 61% chose statehood, but 500,000 ballots were left blank as a protest.
Jesus.
Which is not a good sign. 2017, 97% voted for statehood, but only because everyone else boycotted the referendum because they opposed statehood so much. And then 2020, we finally had a normal vote.
Yeah.
And we had 53% favouring statehood, but with a turnout of only 50% of registered voters. So, and I was trying to read, in preparation for this, I was trying to work out why they were so against it.
Yeah.
Because I thought, why is the only resistance coming from them? Because it is actually, like, the Republicans, it's in their platform for Puerto Rico to be a state.
Yes, yeah.
George H.W. Bush made it a thing. Reagan made it a thing. But even now in 2020, I know the 2020 platform was a holdover from 2016. It still says they support Puerto Rican statehood.
Yes, yeah.
And the answer, as much as I can see, is that essentially the Puerto Ricans feel very, very fucked over by America.
Well, okay, there are actually multiple answers to this. One is statehood referenda are always, to some extent, referenda on the current leadership. Because, that if you're granting statehood gives the current leadership more power. I'm reminded of the glorious attempt at Northern Territory statehood in Australia. I think that referendum was in 1999. And the chief minister of the Northern Territory was this guy called Shane Stone, who I met once. Real just piece of work. And he was so hated by Territorians that there was this campaign like that, because they spent something like $500 million trying to become a state or something. But it came down to a referendum, and the no side won with the campaign statehood, not stonehood. So... I mean, they're still not a state, but the idea...
How would you be if you were that Stone guy?
Oh, yeah, anyway.
What a blow.
Yeah. And to some extent, I mean, Puerto Rico doesn't have a Shane Stone, but part of the weakness of that statehood vote reflected distrust of the governor. The other thing is there are other options, that people potentially want, one of which would actually be independence from the United States. The other thing is that the Puerto Rican community in the United States is also very divided on statehood. The most prominent Puerto Rican politician in America, the aforementioned AOC, is not a statehood supporter. So it's, it is really, really complicated. Yeah. And so far, statehood advocates within Puerto Rico haven't actually been able to do a very good job of not only of sort of barely getting a majority of Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico in favour of it, but also not being able to marshal their allies. Because, AOC may not be a statehood advocate, but she might be persuadable on the issue, but they've made no attempt to persuade her. If they could get her on side, that would surely, produce a lot more momentum around it, given that she's one of the best known members of Congress in America. But apparently they haven't even made any attempt to reach out to her. So.
Which I find very, very strange. But anyway, so that's where that's at. I'm just trying to race through stuff here because I don't want to make this the whole podcast. HR1 has been kicking around for a while. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem there appears to be, Manchin's not for that either, of course.
Of course not.
But let's leave Manchin aside. Mm-hmm. Even without him, they've got real issues with black House members because one of the key aspects of HR1, which I think everyone supports, I shouldn't put words in their mouth, is independent districting.
Yes.
Right? So no more gerrymandering. But there's a nice little racket going there with racial gerrymandering where some of these people in the South have basically seats for life drawn through gerrymandering.
Now, for those of you wondering about this, the Supreme Court has actually ruled that it is a lot of forms of gerrymandering in the US are legal. It is legal to gerrymander for incumbent advantage in the US. It is legal to gerrymander in order to create districts that will have minority representation for majority minority. So it's legal to deliberately create majority minority districts in order to have minority representation. It is illegal to gerrymander in a way that would disadvantage minority groups. Whether partisan gerrymandering is legal is still an open question. Yeah. It's still up in the air. There are still cases going on about it.
There are. And personally, it's each to their own on this one. I would argue that America, it's sounding very Shelby. We're going to get to Shelby in a second. But I would argue America has got to the point now, at least where Democrats are electing black people freely in all kinds of districts, that they don't need to have the racial gerrymandering going for black representation in Congress. But others might disagree.
I think that's always a lot more fragile than it looks.
Quite possibly. But anyway, they are opposing HR1, and it's hard to get them over the line as well.
Yes.
They would give up their seat, essentially.
Yeah.
And Manchin is totally against it. But what Manchin is pushing for is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
Right.
Which I don't think a lot of people know about, so I'll just tell you very briefly now.
Tell us, Chaz.
This is where we get to Shelby. So I'm going to take a step back to the Voting Rights Act from the 60s.
1965.
Thank you very much. Where there's five critical sections, and the one I'm focusing on is section 5, because that was the most powerful one, which basically said it's known as pre-clearance, and just any state or jurisdiction that's got a historical record of discriminatory practices whatsoever, if they want to do anything that could even possibly be seen as discriminatory, they need to get it pre-cleared by either a court or by the government. And they need to, and if the government pre-clears and people want to question it, they can take it to a court as
Yes. Now, these were not just districts in the South.
No.
I want to emphasise. The majority of districts were in the South, but there were boroughs of New York included in this, which had historical racial discrimination. A large part of Alaska was under the pre-clearance provision. Parts of the Southwest of the US. So it wasn't just the South. There are all kinds of discrimination that had taken place.
Yeah, and what Justice Roberts did in Shelby, it was like 2013 from memory,
Yes.
was he basically said, look, we're past racism now, much like I just said with the majority-minority.
Yeah.
Notice I didn't say we're past racism. I said Democrats elect black people.
Yes, yeah.
But anyway. It's like, we're past this now.
See, look, we're not seeing any evidence of racial discrimination in these places anymore. Now, I can't remember who the legislator was that pointed out this is like when you've had an umbrella up for a long time, you're like, oh, look, we're completely dry. We don't need the umbrella anymore.
That was Justice Ginsburg.
Okay.
That's one of her best analogies.
Excellent.
And she was absolutely right because after Shelby versus Holder.
Sorry, late Justice Ginsburg. I did not mean to attribute that to some legislator.
After Shelby versus Holder, when basically pre-clearance is still on the books.
Yeah.
But just no state qualifies anymore, essentially, with this new interpretation from the Supreme Court. After that, it's just they're going to the races. They're just doing whatever they like. It's just defanged completely. Now, what the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act does is to re-legislate so that because what Justice Roberts said there's no procedure here, there's no test, there's no way of there's no objectivity here, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act provides all the objectivity you need, full tests of not just a new coverage formula for states, but also looking at more modern issues of discrimination and so forth. What qualifies as discriminatory and what doesn't qualify as discriminatory, so you can actually apply judicial tests. It's designed specifically for courts, essentially. And so it would bring back the old system, but safeguard it against a dodgy court, theoretically.
Yep.
Now, that would be great if they did that, and Manchin's pushing that.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if they're going to get 10 Republicans to vote for that. I got my doubts, but we'll see. We'll see. That's what he's pushing. Personally, I've had my problems with HR1. I think it bites off more than it can chew. But my concern with this is the biggest outrages are not these things. Like, to me, things like gerrymandering are just the most obvious outrage. And I feel, and I wish that they would have a smaller voting rights bill. And things like the fact they vote on a Tuesday. Like, to me, I can't get past that. Like, just like, that's the most basic possible change.
It's because you need 2 days to ride your horse from church to the market.
Like, to me, it's just a real get it done. They just pass a law that says the election's on Saturday or Sunday. I want to see someone try and argue against that. You will get 10 Republicans. I'm sure you will, because it'll be impossible to argue against that. Just try.
Chaz,
at least try.
This is hopelessly naive.
I know.
Can you imagine?
Even as I said it, I thought, what an idiot.
moving the election to, say, Sunday, as you've suggested.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats hate football. It's the anti-football bill that will kill football.
They should at least try. They're not even trying. And if you end up, at the moment, they're cruising to nothing. That's what they're cruising to. Because they're not going to get HR1 up. So at least give it a go. Anyway.
Cruising to nothing.
That's HR1. That's the infrastructure. I want to go through that. Now, it's now called the American Jobs Plan. Because they got tired of arguing about what's infrastructure and what's not.
Yep.
It's pretty easy to argue what is a job. So now it's the American Jobs Plan. I've been kicking. Actually, I'm going to skip this. I was going to talk about how the pitch for it was kind of bullshit about America being ranked 13th in the world infrastructure. That is complete bullshit. It's
America's own civil engineering peak body gave the infrastructure was it a C-?
Yeah, but that's. I mean, what a surprise! The guys who build stuff,
yes,
they reckon you should build more. I can see a little conflict there. Anyway,
well, I mean, having had some experience with American infrastructure, having lived there for 7 years, I think a C- was fucking generous.
I'm not saying it's wonderful.
You get into LAX and then it just goes. That's bad. Then it just goes downhill from there. Seriously, Chaz, until you until you have driven over the county line from Washtenaw County, which is where Ann Arbor is, into Wayne County, which is where Detroit is, and you can literally feel the road deteriorating underneath you as you cross the county line. This is in the same state where a lot of children don't have access to clean drinking water because of lead in the pipes.
Yeah.
American infrastructure is a bad joke.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying that.
A C- is an honest attempt.
I'm not saying they don't need. I'm not saying they don't need infrastructure.
Yeah.
Infrastructure bills, and I'm certainly supporting them. As I say, I'm going to skip past that because they'll go for a while. 13th at the time.
Yeah, 13th in the world. No.
Yeah.
No.
But I want to talk something which, like, there's a lot of devil in the details here. Like, for instance, broadband.
Yes.
Right? We talk about broadband. America actually is pretty good with broadband, generally speaking. If you look
much better than here.
Yeah, like
everywhere's better than here.
Like there are underserved people.
Yes.
And often it's because they're too poor. It's not just it's not because their area doesn't have it. It's because they don't have it.
Yes.
Like the numbers you see are the numbers of people who don't have and households who don't have broadband.
Yeah.
And the numbers are too high. Like they need some help. 14.5 million Americans don't have broadband. That's 4.3 million households. I'm not saying that, but here's where the devil is in the details.
Yes.
They define broadband as 25 megabits per second download and upload of 3 megabits per second, that's not super speedy, but at least in 2021, that's okay. All right. Like
if you're playing Call of Duty, are you competitive?
Well, you can. Let's put it this way: you can stream a high definition movie.
Right.
So that's Call of Duty, isn't it?
No, Call of Duty's a video game.
No, I know it's not a movie. But in terms of amounts of download.
Oh, okay.
Like a high definition.
I don't know.
movie.
I don't play video games. That's why I've just named one that's probably 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have thought a high definition movie would be more data than a computer game.
I've got no idea.
Anyway, I might be wrong on that. I would have thought it'd been comparable. That's a high definition movie with 3 other people on the web sending email and online shopping simultaneously.
Right.
Okay. Now that's what the current definition is. But for the purposes of this bill, they have redefined it to be 100 megabits download and upload. Now, 93% of traffic is downloaded. You don't tend to do much uploading. That 100 megabit upload bit, that's the bit which it's hard to get past. And all of a sudden they start saying, there's 64 million people who don't have extra people who don't have broadband because they don't qualify with that definition. All right? Let me tell you what that definition means. That high definition movie is 5 megabits per second. Zoom is 1.5 megabits per second. So you're talking 10 Netflix channels and 10 Zoom calls all simultaneously, and then you would still have 25 megabits left over. That's their definition of broadband. Okay, so when they're throwing around these numbers, it's a little bit dodgy.
But doesn't everything just within a matter of years that is what will be
possibly
necessary? Because this technology is just constantly getting bigger.
Oh yeah, I'm not
more detailed.
I'm not saying I can't see a world in which that is. Where that would be useful one day.
So, like, surely a forward-looking infrastructure package would be throwing around these kinds of numbers which look outlandish to us now, but in 10 years' time, that might be the bare minimum of what's required.
Maybe. I mean, like, I suppose that right now they're trying to just do everything.
Yeah.
But my first thought.
Remember the famous IBM quote? Like,
think.
No, it was who was the IBM guy who said, "No one is ever going to need more than 412K of memory on a personal computer."
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. What I would say is I find it difficult to believe they're going to need more than 100 megabits in the next 3 or 4 years. That's what I would say. And therefore, I would say in terms of there'll be another infrastructure bill in 10 years maybe. Let's right now let's fix the drinking water. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
but anyway, but the interesting thing about infrastructure, when you look at the polls, all the components are more popular than the bill itself.
Right.
And I guess that's just about how much mud you throw at it.
Yeah.
Like for instance, in the CBS News poll, 87% support building, repairing roads and bridges, 85% replacing old water pipes. The least popular item,
who doesn't support replacing old water pipes?
Apparently 15%.
What the fuck is wrong with 15% of America?
15% of people are really into brassy tasting water. They love their lead. They like to make pencils out of their water.
Other people are drinking it. Yeah.
The lowest polling item in the list, and it was a long list, was electric car charging stations.
That is fairly predictable.
And that was still 61% approval.
Wow. That's higher than I expected.
Each item is even the high speed trains, which give the shits to certain people, still polled 63% approval.
Yeah.
So the components are popular.
I mean, high-speed trains I can understand because that raises the possibility of never having to deal with American airports or airlines again. Yeah. Which most people would do in a heartbeat if they had an alternative. I mean, American airports are the most massive pain in the ass.
Yeah, I would fill this podcast with a story if I wasn't racing through policies.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they are terrible.
And American Airlines are just some of the most awful corporate entities in America. Yeah.
By the way, when we're talking about the environmental stuff,
yes.
The first thing I do with this kind of stuff is they always go, Solyndra. As soon as you talk about funding environmental programs, Solyndra. Like, Solyndra was like a $500 million loan, I think. And it went bankrupt. This is from the last stimulus.
Yes, yeah.
It went bankrupt. And Tesla didn't go bankrupt and is now one of the biggest companies in the world. That also got a loan. Right? It's like they focus on the one that failed. That program actually made a profit.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's bullshit. The issue though is, and by the way, McConnell's now raised his range of infrastructure to $800 billion. So there is a potential. There is a potential.
I think they are going to get some sort of hard infrastructure bill through. I think
the issue is going to be the funding.
Yeah,
that's where the issue is. It's not the goodies. Biden's keen on just banging up the corporate tax rate from 20 to 28%, which I've got no problems with that. The 2017 tax bill basically cut the average rate of corporate tax in half.
Yes, it did.
From 16% to 8% was their average rate of corporate tax. And he also wants to have a 15% minimum tax for large companies and a global minimum tax. Well, that's not going to happen, so forget that. But
it's an interesting idea.
It is an interesting idea. Yeah. But it's just too easy. There's a real prisoner's dilemma there. Where,
massive collective action problem. Yeah.
But anyway, Manchin saying 25%, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the issue is the Republicans, their red line is don't touch a 2017 tax.
Yes. The only thing that we actually got done during the Trump era.
Yeah.
Do not undo the one legislative achievement of our beloved Mr. Trump.
They just had a meeting just now, like 2 days ago on Wednesday about this, and that was the take-home. They call it productive, but the take-home was Republicans are only going to play ball if they don't touch a 2017 tax cut. That's McConnell's take-home. McCarthy, because this was Pelosi, Schumer, McCarthy, McConnell, and Biden.
Yeah.
McCarthy, his takeaway to his, at least in his fundraiser, was, I just met with corrupt Joe Biden and he's still planning to push his radical socialist agenda onto the American people.
He seriously does one of the worst Trump impressions. Oh dear. That's
pretty lame, but it made even lamer by Joe Biden's accidental burn. I don't know if you saw this. This is such an accidental burn. I mean, he didn't mean this at all.
Yeah.
But he basically used his sundowning to accidentally do who the fuck is that guy?
I'm encouraged not just because of a solid meeting with the Republican leader in the House and with Mitch or Senator McConnell.
Now, sometimes you're not quite sure whether he's forgotten something or not. That time, there is absolutely no doubt. He does not know Kevin McCarthy's name, and I don't blame him. So take that, Kevin McCarthy. Anyway, the biggest threat on this is not Republicans. It's actually Democrats. And it's this SALT thing, which I've told you about before. Just for the people listening who haven't heard this before, essentially what used to be the case was that when you paid state and local tax, with your federal taxes were deductible from your income for the purposes of calculating Actually, it's the other way around. Your state and local taxes were deductible for the purposes of calculating your federal tax. Okay, so if you have an income of $100,000 and you paid $20,000 in state and local taxes, the federal government regarded your taxable income as $80,000. Okay, now that is a big deal to people in New York and Los Angeles because they pay very, very high taxes.
Yes.
Right? And so in 2017, it was quite clever actually, and also good. It was both good economics and good politics from their point of view. The Republicans said, "Hey, what we're going to do is we're going to save a whole lot of money by putting a cap on $10,000 on that deduction." So that's only hurting rich people because only rich people are going to deduct more than $10,000 in state and local taxes from their federal tax burden, and it saves us heaps of money that we can then use for other tax cuts, right? So anyway, so they passed it through, and ever since then, Chuck Schumer in particular has been hell-bent on getting that deduction back. The problem is, it's a real hard sell for a Democrat.
Yes.
Because these are the numbers. 57% of the benefit of that proposed reimbursement of the reimposition of the cap. 57% of the benefit would go to the top 1%. 80% of the benefit would go to the top 5%, and 96% of the benefit would go to the top 20% of taxpayers. Okay? And it would reduce revenues by $327 billion over 5 years. So for the 10-year window, you're talking like $600 billion
Yes.
here. Bernie Sanders is just going, nah.
No.
Bernie Sanders says it would send a terrible, terrible message when you have Republicans telling us that this is a tax break for the rich, which is true. Chuck Schumer is all over it. And so, by the way, the supposed socialists, Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones, who are obviously both from New York.
Yeah.
Right? And there's now a group of about 8 or 9 of these New York Democrats who are just saying, we are not going to pass this bill unless you get rid of the SALT cap.
Wow.
They're just saying no, just drawing a line. No. All right. And remember, it only takes 5 Democrats in the House to flip a bill.
Yes.
So there are too many of them. And
Wow.
$327 billion over 5 years is a big chunk of change to try and find somewhere else.
That is a massive amount of money.
And it's, so that at the moment is a massive issue, and they can't get past it because you also have the Bernie Sanders crew are saying, well, we're not going to let that get through because we don't want to give a $327 billion tax cut to the top 1%.
No.
So that's a real tough one. But anyway, so that is actually the biggest issue, which is part of the reason it's kind of gone away. But I think they'll get through, but it's going to take a while, and it's going to take some negotiating. American Families Plan, very quickly. Maybe look. Let me leave that because I've spent a lot of time going on about legislation.
Okay.
Let's go into Republicans. But which Republican Party are we going to talk about, though? Because now there's 2 of them.
Yeah, so there's this headline, like 150 Republicans
Was it 150 or there's 100?
threatened to form new party. And I was like, wow, well, that's a lot of the Republican caucus. And then you look at it, it includes nobody who is currently in office.
They went through the list of
nobody who is currently in office.
Literally every one of them has the word former in front of their name.
Yeah. In fact, I think that rates of voting for Joe Biden were so high among this group that if they formed a separate party, it would hurt Biden more than it would have hurt Trump.
It totally would. They're all voting for Democrats now. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get their absolute level of disgust with the current Republican Party. It's something that I share, but a separate party, we have gone over so many times about why the US has a very stable 2-party system. It's because of the way that votes translate into seats in the United States. It's winner take all at every level of government.
And just being on the ballot is very hard for a whole bunch of seats.
There is nowhere in the US that I can think of where there'd be a high enough concentration of anti-Trump Republicans to win a seat anywhere. Or if they did, it would be taking a seat off a off a Democrat. If there is any such place, possibly in Connecticut or somewhere like that, if there's any such place, it would have to be a place where a seat was taken off a Democrat. So
if they want to make an impact, they would be much better off just becoming Democrats, and particular becoming Democrats in an area where you might be able to get a conservative Democrat up, like in a purple state or in a slightly red state, and try and get someone up.
Yeah.
Like that would be much more influence than they will ever have on the Republic. If they have one senator, one Democrat senator, this group of people, then that would be much more influence than they'll ever have on the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good luck, so anyway, I mean, there were all these threats being made of forming a separate party back in January. There were threats.
The Trump Party.
Threats on both sides.
Yes,
the Patriot Party.
Yes,
but that evaporated pretty quickly.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's going. I can't believe there's only 100 of them. That's the reason I pulled you up on when you said 150 because.
Yeah.
The reason why 100 stuck out to me was because the very same day I heard about this party, which I'm calling Dad's Party, as a bit of a reference to Dad's Army, these ancient people getting together, is that the very same day I heard about that, I also heard about a letter from the Flag Officers for America, who are these crazy dudes who, like these ex-army guys who wrote a letter basically saying that Biden is like a Marxist force seeking to destroy America's rights or some bullshit. And there are 120 of them.
Oh, wow.
So there are actually more of them on this crazy letter that people just went, oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Than there were from this party that got respect from Reuters and Washington Post.
There you go. And I mean, it was 5 years ago, 200 Republicans signed two separate letters saying that they wouldn't, this is 200 Republican foreign policy experienced people. Yeah, so there are 200 of them then in one domain saying that they wouldn't work with Trump. So, yeah, this if anything, is just getting smaller and smaller, but it excites Jennifer Rubin.
It does. And I believe that the leader of this party was meant to be, they were hoping it would be Liz Cheney. So let's go on to her. Do you have anything to say about her? Are you of the school that she's taking a stand, or she's just following the only path that's at her disposal?
I think she actually is taking a stand.
Okay.
Right. I think that there's some sincerity here. I mean, when I look at the number of Republicans who their existences now revolve around Trump so much. When, Trump's popularity, as you've pointed out, is dropping in the rest of the country. The rest of the country seems to have this desire just to move on. They don't want to hear from him anymore. They don't want to think about it anymore. And yet, if you're a legislative Republican, you are stuck with your life revolving around him. With your endless fundraising is based on, I stand with Mr. Trump and I will... you've got to hint as strongly as possible that you believe that the election was stolen from him. I would like to think that there are more Republicans than just one who find that kind of existence intolerable. Liz Cheney, who's been in Congress for a long time, daughter of a former vice president, I can see why she would find that absolutely intolerable to have to constantly go through that political theater of kissing the Trump ring. So I can understand. I'm it's kind of sad that there aren't more Republicans out there who don't find that intolerable.
But the thing is, it's not that she's not kissing the Trump ring. She's never kissed the Trump ring.
No.
But in the last 3 months or so, she's just got a real I don't give a fuck anymore kind of vibe about it. Where she's going out of her way to try and ding him, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's do you think she's just lost her temper, basically? Just out of had
Yeah,
quite possible.
No, I think I do think that this is an absolutely sincere stance on her part.
To me, the reactions have said it all a bit about a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, firstly, Trump. I mean, he hasn't told us anything we didn't already know.
Yeah.
It was his quote. Liz Cheney is a bitter, horrible human being. I watched her yesterday and realized how bad she is for the Republican Party. She has no personality or anything good having to do with politics or our country. It's not even English. he's fired his subby. This Dana...
No, as we've pointed out, the general rule with the Trump statement is the longer he's allowed to go on, the worse it gets.
Yeah. Although I think the best reactions from Madison Cawthorn. This really sums up. Have you heard this one?
No, I haven't.
This is what he tweeted out. This really sums up where the other side are at the moment.
Yeah.
Nah, 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 nah. Hey, hey, goodbye, Liz Cheney. He tweeted out. And if you want to see someone getting ratioed, I recommend you go look at that tweet because oh my god, he got some replies. It's not the best tweet.
I've said before, as much as it is Trump's party, it's also James O'Keefe's party. Basically, the whole new generation who are coming in were shaped by the James O'Keefe project of just stunts. Like it's just all about stunts now. Just getting as much attention as possible within a certain milieu. There's nothing to do with legislation, nothing to do with persuasion in any way. It's just stunts. And there's actually a very interesting report today saying that between 2017 and 2018, Project Veritas had actually been enlisted by Eric Prince, who was training Project Veritas operatives at his ranch in Wyoming. It was to collect all kinds of dirt on people in the government. And so there were women being sent to date FBI agents, covertly recording them to try to get FBI agents to say something bad about Mr. Trump so they could prove that there was a conspiracy against Trump in the FBI. They were trying to secretly record Trump's first Secretary of State, it wasn't first Secretary of State, second Secretary of State, H.R. McMaster. He wasn't Secretary of State. What was McMaster?
He was National
Security Advisor.
Yeah.
H.R. McMaster, his second National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, to try to get dirt on. He's secretly an anti-Trump operative. Of course, in 2018, McMaster got sent packing anyway.
These are people who got stung by the Washington Post.
Yes.
They were trying to fool the spooks.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, the extent to which James O'Keefe is just utterly part of the fabric of the Republican Party. I mean, because he's had just disaster after disaster, but, he's never going to go away or go down. Because he is part of the fabric of the Republican Party now. And if, it's Trump who obviously controls the party in many ways, but for that new generation coming in, this is the O'Keefe generation.
I reckon that, when you talk about Madison Cawthorn and say Matt Gaetz, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. But
I reckon that they're the standouts. I reckon your median Republican coming through.
Yeah.
They're not like Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're more like Kevin McCarthy. They're more just paint by numbers, really wan.
Kevin McCarthy is yesterday's young man. Okay, and what I mean by that is this.
He's referring to
the
Young Guns.
The classic Simon & Schuster work, Young Guns, a new generation of conservative leaders authored by Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, and Kevin McCarthy. Yeah. Now, as we pointed out, so Madison Cawthorn's the youngest person currently in the Republican caucus at the age of, 24?
Something like that.
Next youngest is Elise Stefanik.
But this is my point. This is exactly my point.
I think Dan Crenshaw's only about a year older. Yeah. So you're right that the median Republican is the more Kevin McCarthy type, but all of the younger people are James O'Keefe types.
I was about to go to Elise Stefanik because I was going to say Elise Stefanik is Kevin McCarthy in my view. So I'm thinking about Elise Stefanik when I say this because look at her. She came in. She's like voting for the Paris Agreement. She's voting against the tax cut, the 2017 tax cut. She's voting for the Equality Act, all this kind of stuff, and then she suddenly realizes, oh shit, I'm about to get primaried.
Right.
And so then she just renounces everything she's ever done. She just becomes this really pale imitation of a Trumpster. Like to try and act like she's, I'm all outraged about impeachment and stuff. And she's going through the motions in such an obvious way.
Yeah. This, by the way, this is the life that Liz Cheney does not want to lead.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Like you look at her statement where she basically campaigned straight after Liz Cheney got booted to take her position. It used the phrase socialist Democrats 5 times. in it was one page. And she said it 5 times. Like that was Kevin McCarthy's one, Socialist Democrats.
Yeah.
And so she's just painting by numbers. Like she's a smart person, at least definitely. And she's just acting like a moron because she thinks that's what gets her.
These people have ever considered that they're actually, if they just use the word socialist to apply to everything, including to policies that are really popular, that they're going to destigmatize the word socialist.
Well, of course they will. But I think these people are just getting through till tomorrow. I think Kevin McCarthy is just trying to stay leader long enough to be speaker.
Yeah.
And I think, anyway, so my theory is that a lot of these people, your Marjorie Taylor Greenes, they're pure James O'Keefe. But I think a lot of these people, they don't want stunts. They just want to just get through with bullshit. Just put out their statement and then just collect their money and just survive another 2 years and maybe work their way up the ladder.
It's inspiring.
Exactly. Anyway, I'll briefly talk about the Stormy Daniels thing.
But can I just say one more thing on this?
Yeah,
if you look at what's happening at state level Republican legislatures,
that's true.
Completely James O'Keefe's party.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's true. Stormy Daniels, this didn't get a huge amount of press.
No, I was not aware that we were going to talk about Stormy Daniels.
Yeah. The Federal Election Commission dismissed the allegations.
Oh, yeah, Trump I did see these, yes.
With Stormy Daniels. So that was his inability to declare the money he paid Stormy Daniels as an election expense, even though it was clearly to help his election. Now, bear in mind, it was precisely these allegations, like literally these allegations, that have seen Michael Cohen in jail.
Yes.
He is serving 3 years in jail because of these allegations that were just dismissed against Trump.
Oh, poor Michael.
Imagine if you were Michael. In fact, you don't even need to imagine you're Michael Cohen because I've got his quote. This is what he said after he found out that it was dismissed.
Yeah.
The hush money payment was done at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald J. Trump. Like me, Trump should have been found guilty. How the FEC committee could rule any other way is confounding.
Well, it's very clear how it could rule any other way because it's evenly split between Republicans and Democrats.
It's funny you say that.
Yes.
Because there is a question I have,
which
I cannot find an answer to.
Right.
Maybe one of our listeners can. If you do, please please hit me up in the comments and let me know because I have looked for this. The vote was deadlocked 2-2.
Yeah.
There are 6 people on the FEC.
Yeah.
Okay. There were 2 Democrats versus 2 Republicans. One Republican recused himself.
Yes.
The other Democrat wasn't there for the vote.
That's a standard procedure. When one
person recuses.
If one person can't be there, someone from the other side recuses.
Oh,
that's it's a practice known in parliamentary procedure as pairing.
Yeah. Okay. So
I assume is what.
So the recusing was the pairing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because if that was the case, then that's fine because it would have been 3-3.
Yeah.
But otherwise, because if a Democrat didn't turn up for some reason. And that's the reason they end up dismissing it. I would have been very.
Look, I don't know what actually happened, but I assume that was a very standard pairing procedure.
That sounds reasonable.
Yes.
Anyway, their logic was this. By the way, before I tell you their logic, let me just remind you that in December 2020, the General Counsel for the FEC released a report saying, quote, they found that they had reason to believe violations of campaign finance law were made knowingly and willfully by the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
Right. That's what their counsel said.
That was pretty fucking obvious.
Yeah. This is the quote. The public record is complete with respect to the conduct at issue in these complaints, and Mr. Cohen has been punished by the government of the United States for the conduct at issue in these matters. Thus, we concluded that pursuing these matters further was not the best use of agency resources. And they also know that they had a huge backlog and that this was potentially statute of limitations imperiled if they didn't get a report out soon.
There you go.
All right. So in other words, and they're right, there is a backlog of 446 matters. But their argument is that Cohen was so well punished that Trump doesn't need to be. Cohen's kind of the Jesus Christ in this scenario, dying for Trump's sins.
Not a role he wanted.
Anyway, that's a bit of justice for you. From the Federal Election Commission talks about the NRA, which might be a different story.
Yeah, so the NRA just attempted to file for bankruptcy in order to escape prosecution in the state of New York. So New York's Attorney General Letitia James has been going after the NRA for essentially embezzling the leadership of the NRA for essentially embezzling funds from its own members. And it has been well documented at this point that Wayne LaPierre, who's been at the head of the NRA for 30 years or something, used NRA funds to take his family on multiple luxury trips every year involving private jets and, destinations in the Bahamas.
$500,000 to fly to the Bahamas 8 times.
Yes. Yeah, so it is pretty clear what's been going on. Now, the NRA has really been riven by infighting, pretty serious infighting for quite a while. Part of it is because NRA TV got big and sort of became its own entity, and there was a real fight between the leaders of NRA TV and the leaders of the NRA. And part of that was over what the focus of the organisation should actually be, because NRA TV was essentially just a Trump propaganda channel. There used to still be people in the NRA who thought that it should be focused on guns, perhaps. So there's a lot of people within the NRA who want to bring Wayne LaPierre down. And so attempting to file for bankruptcy, also declaring they were going to move to Texas.
Yeah, actually, sorry. Before you get to that,
yes,
there's a couple of things that two things we need to say.
Yes.
First of all is the most blatant bit of embezzling was that LaPierre arranged for the NRA to pay him $1 million a year through 2030 if he left his job.
Whoa.
And the reason this is all important is because under New York law, which is where they are incorporated.
In 1871.
That's right. If the directors or members, is a quote, if the directors or members in control of the corporation have looted or wasted the corporate assets, have perpetuated the corporation solely for their personal benefit, or have otherwise acted in an illegal, oppressive or fraudulent manner, you can wind up the company.
Right.
That's the reason.
Yes.
That's what all this is about. And Letitia James has said, I am coming for you. I am going to wind you up.
Yes.
She's the Attorney General of New York.
Yeah.
So that is why they then declare bankruptcy.
Yes.
Try to go to Texas.
And trying to skip to Texas.
Yeah.
But they're not allowed to declare bankruptcy. No. So, I don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but that little escape route has been sealed off.
My favorite bit is the judge when he said that. He said that them filing bankruptcy is less like a traditional bankruptcy case in which a debtor is faced with financial difficulties, but more filed to gain an unfair advantage in litigation or to avoid a regulatory scheme, he says. But my favorite quote is that he said, he made the point that that the NRA had, where was it? They actually said in the court case itself that they were in their strongest, quote, strongest financial condition in years as they were filing for bankruptcy. This is the
amazing thing, because, that judge's comment that this doesn't look like a traditional bankruptcy, it looks like something for, advantage in litigation. That's what the NRA was bragging about in emails to its members. Like, you may have heard that we're declaring bankruptcy. Well, it's a clever legal maneuver to get ourselves to Texas.
So we'll see what happens there. It's going to be a 2022 trial.
Yes.
It's going to be next year.
We do need to bear in mind, though, a couple of important things about the NRA.
I don't think they're going to wind them up, by the way, but I think there's
probably
a serious fine.
Probably not. The NRA does remain one of the most potent lobbying organisations in the United States, despite the fact that it's in complete disarray and despite the fact that it is in serious financial trouble. The reason is, as we've pointed out before in this podcast, the NRA's lobbying power doesn't actually need a huge amount of money to do it. It's all about basically monitoring what legislators are doing and then producing these scorecards, which they are terrified of, that if they don't get the highest possible score, they'll get primaried by someone who is more pro-gun. I also think that the NRA has taken the culture of the Republican Party along with it so far, it would almost not need to exist at this point to maintain the status quo around gun legislation in the United States. I think there was a time when the NRA, was actually really important in driving the backlash against gun control. I'm not sure it's even that important anymore. So even if the NRA was wound up, I don't think that the position of guns in the US would become any weaker. That's my pessimistic assessment.
I think you're right. I think we've probably said this before, but I think that America has got to a point now with guns where there are just so many around and people are so pessimistic about the chance of substantially reducing the number that they feel there's no way they can defend themselves without a gun.
Yes.
And once you get to that point, it's very hard to come back.
Yes. Just before we go, because we are at time now, I just want to point out a correction. So I mentioned last week that there was basically no conspiracy theory that Trump had ever not gone along with.
Oh, which one?
Well, Rick Lewin pointed out there is one. He says, to be fair to Trump, and this is something I rarely say, I am not sure he expressly adopted the conspiracy theory that JFK Jr. was alive and going to serve as his running mate and vice president. I think you're right there, Rick. So that's this week's correction.
That's a good correction.
Yes.
Well made. We'll see you guys next week. And next week, I'll get this to you sometime before 2 a.m. See you guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.